Welcome to the Safety Pro Podcast, where we help you manage workplace safety one episode at a time. And now, your very own Safety Pro, Blaine J. Hoffman.
All right, it's time for another episode of the Safety Pro Podcast. I'm going to continue where I left off in the last episode. Of course, we're talking about the partnership with OSHA, the Voluntary Protection Program, or VPP. And I have to repeat this again. Just because you're not interested in VPP doesn't mean this episode wouldn't be beneficial to you. If you follow the elements of the VPP and the sub-elements, those are what OSHA says are the fundamental elements of any great safety and health management system, and any company following these elements and sub-elements will improve their safety and health program. Trust me, you're going to want to listen to the first episode as well as continue on with this episode and the next two, where I break down the four elements, one episode at a time. So, of course, element number 2 in the VPP is worksite analysis, and we're going to break down what that means in all the sub-elements. But first, I want to remind you that the reason why I'm doing this is making available for the first time on our website. The link is going to be on the show notes as well. The VPP Simplified Gap Tool. It's an interactive spreadsheet that breaks down all the four elements into the sub-elements, gives you guidance notes for each element and sub-element. It allows you to set your current state using a stoplight. You're also able to check off how you verified that with, either document review, interviews, or observation. So the paper, people, places, the 3 Ps that you want to shoot for across the board. You can at least say, well, we have a document for this, but nobody's really aware of it, and we don't see it being followed in the workplace. You can then set your current state, and with the bar charts that are provided, you can see which areas you're going to have the most trouble with and where you can start setting your, sort of your tactical approach of what do we start with first? Well, safety and health education, safety and health training, we're really lacking in that area according to our gap assessment. So that tool is very powerful. Not only will it help you prepare for VPP because you're able to, as you close items out and go green on some items, complete on some items, you're able to put the notes explaining how you verified that sub-element, how you're meeting that element. That language can become the language you use for your VPP application. But non-VPP companies that don't have any interest in pursuing VPP, can use this exact same tool to improve their safety and health program. So go check it out. It's worth the look. It's again, show notes are going to have a link, and it's on the website consulthoffman.com, 2 F's, 2 N's. But as always, I try to tell you, this is information you can use right now, right? This is information that you can take with you as you're finished listening. Each episode, you can go and act on it. So I am going to break down worksite analysis for you. So even if you have no interest in getting the GAP tool, don't worry. I'm going to explain every sub-element of worksite analysis that you need to understand and give you some examples of what OSHA is looking for there. Okay, so let's get started. The sub-elements of worksite analysis are as follows. A, baseline hazard analysis. B, hazard analysis of significant changes. C, hazard analysis of routine activities. D, routine inspections. E, hazard reporting. F, hazard tracking. G, accident incident investigation. H, safety and health program evaluation. And I, trend analysis. We've got quite a few sub-elements in this second VPP element. So let's start with a baseline hazard analysis. What is OSHA talking about when we say, have you conducted your baseline hazard analysis? That means, did you identify all the hazards on the facility or in the facility, including a review of comprehensive surveys, self-inspection results, previous mishaps you may have had, or previous injuries or illnesses, any complaints, even complaints or safety concerns that have been brought up regarding workplace hazards, all of that stuff. A baseline survey and analysis is a first attempt at understanding the hazards of a workplace. So it also establishes initial levels of exposure or baseline for comparison to future levels so that changes can be recognized. So systems for identifying safety and industrial hygiene hazards often are integrated but may be evaluated separately. So you can then break out like air monitoring, and just look at air monitoring in certain areas or noise monitoring in certain areas. So you can do it separately, but what you're going to want to do at the end is combine all of these different surveys into one baseline analysis. So you have a pretty good snapshot of these are all the hazards our employees face working in our facilities. So at a minimum, your baseline survey must identify and document common safety hazards associated with the site, such as those found in OSHA regulations or even building codes and NFPA standards. So you're going to want to look at those as well. And you're going to have to show how they are controlled. So that's going to be key. Identify and document common safety hazards associated with the site and how they're controlled. Also, identify and document common health hazards, usually by some sort of initial screening, direct read instrumentation, things like that, noise, air, light, stuff like that. Okay, and then of course, determine if further sampling is needed, like a full shift dosimetry, like an 8-hour time-weighted average, if your direct read or grab sample yields any kind of significant findings. Also, identify and document safety and health hazards that need further study. Something that maybe in the process of going through your worksite, you said, wow, we're going to need to tabletop, or we're going to need to parking lot this, and we're going to come back to it and try to write a scope to have a contractor come in and look at this. Maybe it's an engineering study. Maybe it's something to do with your roofs. Maybe it's something to do with fall protection and where folks need to tie off, and we're not sure if parts of the structure will support that. So you're going to need to identify areas that might need further study. Also, be sure that you cover the entire work site, okay? That means inside and out, wall to wall, fence to fence. That's what we used to say. You want to go all the way around 360 degrees, top to bottom, front to back, side to side. You're going to want to indicate who conducted the survey or who participated or who you contracted to help with this in any way, shape, or form, and of course when it was completed. Now, this original baseline hazard analysis, you don't necessarily need to repeat this, and unless any kind of significant change in processes or equipment or even hazard controls took place. But once you get your baseline, then you kind of work off of it to establish your regular rhythm of, we identified that certain areas of our shop contain, elevated levels of noise. So we're going to put those areas on an annual review or survey. So it's not like you got to go do the entire shop unless you move pieces of equipment out of one area into another, introduce new equipment with noise. What this is saying is, maybe you identify hotspots, you only go and tackle those hotspots and get sort of a PM or a regular rhythm around testing those areas in the future. Also, the baseline industrial hygiene study is what you're also going to want to do. So there's a hazard analysis, but there's also an industrial hygiene study. Air, maybe you get into some chemicals in the workplace, things of that nature. So follow the same guidelines there when you're doing the IH study. You're also going to want to make sure that you have in place a process to record, track, and report IH data, which includes any information like sampling time, date, personnel, job title, any concentrated measures and calculations used. Explain your rationale, the rationale you used, and the methodology. That'll also assist the facility in future IH sampling efforts. So what'll happen is a couple years from now, personnel may change, new management, maybe a new safety director, safety manager, who knows. But at least you've got that all documented. So, any incoming personnel or change in personnel will be able to look back and say, okay, this is basically what took place a couple of years ago. We're going to go ahead and redo that and revisit that. So that was A. Now B, hazard analysis of significant changes. So management of change, MOC. In general, you want a good management of change process or workflow established to capture this stuff. So we're talking about pre-use analysis. It has to be used when you're considering new equipment, chemicals, or even facilities. So that's going to be key. This also covers internal moves. So if you move one work area to another part of the building and for expansion or growth, even though it's equipment that you've been using for years, whenever you start taking it apart, disassembling it, unhooking it, moving it across the shop and hooking it up in a different area, maybe you missed an electric line, maybe you missed a ground, maybe you're in different lighting conditions, the ventilation's different over there, who knows, you may have introduced new hazards that you didn't think of. So you're going to want to assess that change, if you will. Also, make sure that procedures are established for conducting hazard analysis of significant changes for all non-routine tasks, including significant facility, equipment, chemical modifications or changes, and processes performed less than once a year. Get with your maintenance department. Get with companies, the contractors that come in and service certain facilities, utilities, air handling systems, equipment that has PM schedules that go once every 12 months or once every 24 months or 18 months. Those non-routine tasks, you want to break those down. You want to assess those as well. That brings us to sub-element C, hazard analysis of routine activities. So an effective hazard analysis program has to be developed that identifies and documents safety and health hazards of routine jobs, tasks, and procedures. And you have to ensure that non-supervisory personnel are involved in this process. You've got to get them involved. Go to where the work happens, talk to the operators, and talk to engineers, talk to maintenance and supervisors as well. So this requirement that OSHA has for VPP or any excellent safety and health management system, it's not so much a requirement for hazard analysis to be done routinely, but at least to be performed on routine activities. So make sure I'm clear on that distinction. You don't perform this routinely; you perform it on routine activities. And then anytime you modify or change an activity because you've introduced a new step in the process, a new tool, you've changed to a different piece of equipment, you then reassess the routine task. Task-based or system process hazard analysis must be performed to identify the hazards of routine jobs, tasks, and processes in order to recommend adequate hazard controls. Okay? Acceptable techniques include, but are not limited to, according to OSHA, a job hazard analysis, or JHA, a process hazard analysis, or PRHA. You can use fault mode event analysis, like a FEMA. You can use a what if, fishbone. You can use any number of tools as long as the methodology is centered around, breaking down the routine tasks into steps and identifying each one for hazards and then coming up with how you're going to mitigate or control those hazards. So to that end, a good hazard analysis will describe, where it is happening, the environment, who or what is happening, and that would be your exposure, or what precipitates the hazard, the trigger, and of course the outcome should that happen, the consequence. And you can throw any other contributing factors in there, but if you've got the environment, the exposure, the trigger, and the consequence, you're going to have the foundation, you're going to lay the groundwork to be able to come up with how do we modify the environment? How do we change the exposure? What if we eliminate the trigger? Or how do we minimize the consequence? You can tackle each one of those inputs or outcomes to manage the hazard. Hopefully that made sense. Your response to any of these items in this sub-element may have bearing on the minimum requirements in the first section of the VPP. Is do you have a minimally effective written safety and health management system? If you are not breaking down routine tasks in this way, you run the risk of having an auditor say, no, you do not have a minimally effective safety and health management system. You're not even routinely breaking down routine tasks and trying to mitigate those hazards. Okay, let's get to sub-element D as in David. Routine inspections. And this is one of those necessary evils, something we have to do in our businesses. Do you have a system for conducting, documenting, and tracking the results of routine self-inspections of the workplace? Have you developed those? That's what you need to answer. Okay? That's it in a nutshell. It's a single question that you have to answer. and you have to show that you've been doing it for at least 12 months prior to submitting your VPP application. And if you're not interested in VPP, you have to at least show an auditor that you have a track record or a history of having been doing this for some time. So the next sub-element, letter E, hazard reporting. Do you have an effective hazard reporting system in place? Yes or no? It's pretty simple. It can be anonymous. You can allow employees to be anonymous. It can allow personnel to use specific tools to notify management, either in writing or alternative methods like a digital tool, software, something like that. And it has to be, all of this has to be without fear of reprisal about possible hazard conditions. And it has to provide timely and adequate response to ensure hazards are tracked until they're abated or controlled. So having a board where you can write down hazards that are reported, not by whom, but in this work area, this hazard was reported on this day, and it's visible, and you can mark off progress going forward as you've gotten a PO cut to have a contractor come in and work on that. You've contacted the electrician, and the rewiring that machine is going to take place on Tuesday. You can keep notes on this board, and that's a good, effective way, and quite honestly, low-cost way of notifying, keeping employees apprised as to the progress of the concerns that they're reporting, either anonymous or otherwise. So keep in mind, a minimally effective system of hazard reporting will identify hazards associated with normal operations at the site. And good inspections should verify that existing controls are still in place and effective. So you're gonna couple your hazard reporting and tie it to your inspection process. So as hazards get reported, you want to go back and look and say, when was that area last inspected? Was it ever at all? How do we ramp that up? How do we add that to our schedule of areas to be inspected? And if you have a dynamic work environment where conditions change frequently, you may need more frequent inspections based on hazard reports that are coming in. So that brings us to letter F, and that is hazard tracking. An effective hazard tracking system needs to be developed and used to correct the hazards identified through the following means: baseline safety and industrial hygiene surveys, hazard analysis of routine jobs, self-inspections, near-miss reports, personnel reports of hazards, trend analysis, and mishap investigations. You got to track all that stuff. So you have to have a way of tracking those. It's either on a board, having a spreadsheet, creating some graphs and charts over time that show trends. This is what you're going to need to be doing. A documented system must be in place to ensure that hazards identified by any means, either self-inspections, accident investigations, hazard reports, PMs, injury illness trends, all that good stuff. You have to make sure they're assigned to a responsible party and corrected in a timely fashion. So what you're going to do with this stuff as they come in is you identify trends, reports come in, injury illnesses occur, and you investigate and you come up with action items that need to be performed. You got to have a way or a process or system in place, and it's got to be documented, to assign those to folks that are responsible for getting those things closed. And then, of course, you're going to have to make sure they have the resources to get those things closed. Is there a minimally effective means for employees to report hazards and have them addressed? You just keep that in mind. That's the question you need to answer. And, of course, to be minimally effective, employees must be free to report a hazard and must be able to have their concerns addressed, reported hazards controlled in a timely manner. So you're going to need to answer that overall question. Is there a minimally effective means for employees to report hazards and have them addressed? If you say yes, it better be documented, better be in writing, a process spelled out as to how this is going to happen. So sub-element G is accident and incident investigation. Do you have a written process for mishap or near-miss investigation? Have you developed that? An investigation system is not minimally effective if it does not include investigation of incidents, including near misses, where significant hazards are present, or if investigations of accidents and incidents are conducted but do not include a reasonable attempt to identify contributing factors. So get away from the operator error syndrome, okay? And we shouldn't have to put guarding or anything on any piece of equipment if operators would just not put their hands in there. You got to get away from that mentality. The results of mishap or near-miss investigations have to be reviewed to identify previously addressed hazards which contributed to the near-miss or incident or mishap. So what you want to do is you want to do a look back and see, hey, what inspection records do we have of this area? Did we write anything up that was out of compliance or that needed repaired? What about PM records of this machine? Have we had problems in the past? Have we had similar incidents or near misses in the past? Your program must require that trigger to take place. Okay, if it doesn't, you're going to be in trouble with this one. So let's move on to H, sub-element H, Safety and Health Program Evaluation. Written procedures have to be established enabling the facility's personnel, managers, or trained outsiders, consultants for example, to evaluate the entire safety and health management system annually, addressing the 4 key elements. We're only on element 2, by the way, and all the sub-elements. Let me say that again. The facility has to conduct an evaluation of the safety and health management system annually and address the 4 key elements and all the sub-elements of the VPP. So you've already conducted a baseline evaluation of the entire safety and health management system. If you use the GAP tool, for example, the VPP Simplified GAP tool, that will serve as your baseline analysis, that one tool. If you go through all of those 82 different line items in the 4 elements and sub-elements, you will have conducted a baseline analysis. It's already, that tool works for you. It's already laid out for you. And I'm going line by line through this tool, one element at a time, by the way. So you can actually use this, take notes, and go back and listen again a couple of times if you have to. But these are the questions you have to answer. Sub-element I, trend analysis. You have to develop a trend analysis program, including at a minimum the following areas that you trend. Okay, you look for trending for: injuries and illnesses, personnel hazard reports, first aid cases, mishaps, hazards identified during inspections, and near misses. Don't forget near misses, that's a big one. The trend analysis is not minimally effective if the evaluation team finds, if the on-site team or OSHA team or an auditor finds easily observable trends that indicate serious uncontrolled hazards that you did not find. So keep that in mind. If they find easily observable trends by looking through your records that you did not identify, they're going to claim that, this sub-element of trend analysis process is not effective. You don't have an effective one. You have to use data from existing injury illness logs like the 300 log. You can use data obtained from personnel hazard reports, so workers reporting safety concerns or hazards. You can use that as your trend analysis. You can do a heat map of your plant and say, these are the 4 areas of the shop that we get the most complaints about regarding safety, or we have the most findings when we do our weekly safety inspections, stuff like that. You can also look at first aid case data obtained from, personnel reports, either supervisor reports or, anything like that, or like I said earlier, 300 log. You can use data obtained from investigations of, fires, equipment damage, things like that you discover through an investigation process. You can use that for trend analysis. Of course, I mentioned self-inspections. That's going to drive a huge, aspect of trend analysis is over time, what do you keep finding and what do you keep seeing out there? And near misses. I mentioned earlier, that's going to be huge. That's really, really important. Don't miss this one, okay? My recommendation has always been, in the past, to my former clients, has been, if the only real difference between a near miss and an accident is the lack of injury, illness, or property damage, otherwise the same event occurred, you should be using the same investigation techniques and forms and documentation. If you have somebody that steps out into an aisle and gets clipped by a fork truck, and you do a fishbone 5Y and you take photographs and measurements, how is that any different than somebody who steps out, the fork truck just misses them by dumb luck? You should still take that opportunity to do a deep dive, do a fishbone 5Y, because you you're now ahead of it slightly, even though it happened in the past. It's still a lagging indicator. Near misses are a lagging indicator for you to be trending, but at least you've bought some time because there was no injury, illness, or property damage. So you should be using the same forms. Don't overlook near misses. So I just ran down the second element of VPP and all the sub-elements. Take notes, go back and listen again, shoot me some emails. I'm still getting emails off the first one, so you're going to want to make sure that you jot this stuff down and go through your safety and health program and look to see if you've got any of these processes spelled out, okay? And if you don't, start now. Now's the time to start, okay? So, hey, I've enjoyed this little talk. This was a short one. I kind of blew through the second element, but I read line by line exactly what OSHA and the on-site team is going to look for VPP, or what most auditors are going to look for if they come into a non-VPP site to see, if your safety program is at least minimally effective. These elements right here that I just read off to you, these sub-elements I should say, these are a good indication that you have a minimally effective program. So really take this to heart, take every one of these sub-elements and go put them in place in your business today, okay? Hey, until next time, be safe.
Thanks for listening to the Safety Pro Podcast. Be sure to visit www.consulthoffman.com for articles and information about safety services. To have Blaine read your question on the show, email him at customerservice@consulthoffman.com. Be sure to have 2 F's and 2 N's on Hoffman. Until next time, be safe.